Constraint can be a compass or a cage. The art is knowing whether it's leading toward clarity or confinement. Here's how constraint led me to clarity this week, which is a heart week of my H3 focus in the shop, led me toward clarity and not confinement. I'm going to go off script quite a bit on this video, as I've tried shooting it several times and it just sounds like me reading a blog post, which if you want to read the blog post, you should go over to momentsofwill.substack.com where you'll see the full blog post. Or you can go to valorcraftworkshop.substack.com and see the more geared toward the workshop audience version of the blog. And we'll treat this video just as a little bit more of a teaser toward that. But it's all looking around that idea of constraint and how it can help you toward gaining clarity and focus in your work, or it can put you in a corner, in a cage, and sort of confine new, fresh ideas from happening. The problem I've had, and the case study I'll discuss, centers around one of my Etsy shops it was called Arpeggio Home and Design. The idea of being a little bit more upscale, handmade woodworking items. It was the original plan for the shop of what I was doing before Valorcraft was a thing. The official company's name is Arpeggio Workshop LLC, and this was one of the offshoots of that. My joy in doing this kind of making work started with woodworking, and that's where that shop was headed. And then very quickly took a left turn into the areas of laser engraving and 3D printing and all these other things. The problem I've had is trying to determine what to sell in that shop so it didn't look like every other handmade custom woodworking shop out on Etsy. How many more end-grain cutting boards do we need? How many more charcuterie boards do we need? Christmas ornament, I don't know, you name it. Ice cream scoops, handmade pens. I like doing all of these things, but how do I make them unique to put in the shop? And when I would brainstorm ideas of what to put in the shop, what sells, this was the question I was starting with. What sells? Well, that list was miles long. What am I capable of making in the shop? Again, that's miles long. From skills I have, tools I have, items that sell on Etsy traditionally, the list is endless what I could do. The question is, how do I use constraint to give me clarity and focus rather than constraint to confine me? And when I was asking the question, what sells, it didn't provide me the clarity I needed. It confused things more. It caused procrastination. It caused stagnation. Basically, I just stopped making. I stopped making those things because there was zero joy in it for me. And there was no limit of how many boring mass-produced items I could possibly make. So it just led me to make none. And to this point of 6 months of that shop being open, I think I know I have 0 sales and a handful of views. So I was ready to quit on Arpeggio Home and Design until I reframed things, came up with this brand framework for it. And it's no longer Arpeggio Home and Design, but now it's just called Arpeggio Design. It opens things up for me to do a few more quirky things that might feed my heart rather than just feed the pocketbook. I went from asking that wrong question of what sells to the right question of what feeds my heart. This brand framework I've been working on, this is the answer to the mass-produced crap that's out there. That's not necessarily crap. Some people mass produce some really nice products. Well, that's fine. That doesn't feed my heart. I've got 2 kinds of items that I want to put in my shop. The one-of-a-kind item, like literally one copy of something, the art piece, and the few-of-a-kind items. Few-of-a-kind items will be an artifact of that big one-of-a-kind item, that art piece. So these are the artifacts of that. Something that carries the spirit of the big piece, but in a more accessible product that most people could afford and still limited in the numbers of how many are produced. The story of the wood in this case, or the material that I'm using for this first small batch, one-of-a-kind, few-of-a-kind project, I have about 200 square feet of 1-inch thick maple basketball court with varying amounts of paint lines on said court. And I've been carrying this around with me for 4 or 5 moves, which equates to about 15 years of time. Sometimes I moved it, sometimes I had movers move it. but it's been in and out of storage units, in and out of moving trucks from South Carolina to Virginia to storage places somewhere, and then eventually out to Arizona. I didn't take it to Korea with me, at least. That would have been a lot of weight. But again, endless possibilities of what I could do with it. And for my work in process video this week, which may or may not come out before or after this video, I will go into my brainstorming decision-making process, so I won't go into that deep here. But I will tell you what I came up with. What I came up with was my one-of-a-kind item I wish to do with this material is a extremely large cutting board, in grain, 3-inch thick, maybe 24 inches by 24 inches. Huge. This is like butcher block, goes on your counter, probably doesn't leave it unless you've got someone else to help you lift it. And then the few-of-a-kind items that are offshoots of that one-of-a-kind item are charcuterie boards that I will make with the paint side down on the charcuterie board, and then the clean maple, finished maple, and sealed on top, and your cheese and crackers go there. So that when it's hung on a wall, and I don't know how I'm going to do the handle yet, when it's hung on the wall, it's going to be very clearly a basketball court piece, and then on the flip side, the beautiful green that's bound in a maple. I use this museum analogy to explain my one-of-a-kind and few-of-a-kind items. In a museum, you may go see a great piece of art by an artist, say like Calder, the guy that does those awesome giant mobiles. Now, you can't buy that, the one that's hanging there, unless you had loads of money. Maybe you would entertain the idea. You can't buy that one-of-a-kind museum piece, but you go to the gift shop and they've got all these smaller little mobiles, do-it-yourself mobile kits or different things at a smaller price point, but it's a gallery shop price point. It's a way for you to take the essence of that one-of-a-kind item home with you. So that's the framework I'm working within, and that's what leads me to my one huge cutting board, the art piece, and then the artifacts of the charcuterie boards. I think I'm just going to clip in a still of a Venn diagram I drew so poorly for another video. I'll just put the picture of it in here and talk over it. There are 3 forces at work here: story, constraint, and discovery. And in this Venn diagram, this basketball court project sits right at the intersection of these 3 forces. This first circle of story, this carries the meaning, the connection, and the why. The meaning, people walked on this court. They played on this court. They sweated on the surface before it came to me. That's kind of gross now that we're thinking about putting cheese and crackers on it, but it is what it is. It'll be all cleaned up before it goes to your kitchen. Connection, it has moved with me. It's connected to me. I've carried this stuff around. I've moved it several times myself and with movers doing the work for me on occasion. And the why it matters, well, because it carries memory and resilience. So that's the story of this material. The second circle is constraint. These are the lanes. These are my left and right limits, as we used to say in the military. This helps keep me on a path. I have a limited amount of wood available to me, 200 square feet-ish, and finite options of what I can fit within that amount of wood. And then the framework that I developed, the one-of-a-kind and few-of-a-kind categories, that gives some shape to my choices as well. And then fists, I'm not chasing every idea. This anchors me on those 2 ideas, the 2 items, the art piece and the artifact that I'll pull from this material. The third circle is discovery, and that's where surprise and pattern and play exist. Surprise in the grain that's uncovered as I work with the material, the pieces of painted lines on the different pieces of wood, the wear marks that are revealed as I cut through the wood, the pattern, how these boards yield both large art pieces and smaller artifacts. I've got different lengths of these that I can use in different ways, different pieces I paint on them, some don't. So it's how I can merge those together to make these different products. And then play, that's a major part of discovery, is playing with the material, testing its limits, testing your capabilities and your limits, and working with the material. At the overlap of these 3 circles lies the sweet spot, the heart-fed making. This is where the work feeds my heart, not just my hands. So in this instance, constraint didn't close me in. It did provide me clarity. It opened me up some different ideas. It gave me the clarity I needed, the focus I needed, the compass, the direction I needed to protect my joy and my art and my heart. Because in the end, story is the through line. In this case, story saved the brand, story gave meaning to the material, and it helped me choose what stays and what goes. All right, coming Wednesday-ish is my work in process, which follows along these same lines. This is an H3 focus week of heart. H3 is my head, hands, heart focuses, foci. So be sure to check out this week's work in process as well. Whether or not it comes out on Wednesday, we'll see, but I'll drop a link to it because they may come out at about the same time. Not every process is about sanding and finishing. Sometimes the process is about whittling down the ideas themselves. This week, I'm going to share my brainstorming session, or a recreation of my brainstorming session, 10 things I could make with 200 square feet of basketball court maple. It's a look at how I moved from constraint to options to clarity, using the same kinds of systems I learned in project management, design thinking, and even risk management. Because if you're going to do a task more than once, you need a process. This segment has been a moment of Will. I'm Will. A segment I try to do every Monday-ish. This week's late. So until next time, be good people. Be good people, or be both. Talk to y'all again soon.